On a frozen February night in 1943, Norway's snowy silence was pierced by the blare of alarms, barking guard dogs and spotlights slashing through the dark. The world's largest heavy water plant had just been sabotaged. In this video, using the latest maps, unique wartime footage, as well as the personal stories of those who were there, we'll follow in the ski tracks of those brave commandos who stopped the Nazi atomic program in its tracks. This is the story of Operation Gunnerside. By early 1939, the race for atomic energy was still in its relative infancy. The Germans had created their infamous uranium club, led by the Reich's brightest minds, including Kurt Diebner as well as Nobel Prize winner Werner Heisenberg. They were to spearhead nuclear energy research and the German atomic bomb program. It's no exaggeration to say that nuclear energy is complex and requires many components, but one stood out from the others: a moderator. Used to slow down the bombardment of neutrons and control the fission process, it effectively helps sustain a chain reaction. In the pursuit of the ideal moderator, where the Americans zigged, the Germans zagged. Instead of using graphite, the uranium club instead opted for deuterium oxide, or heavy water. But what is it? Simply put, it's water where the hydrogen in its molecules has been replaced by deuterium, giving it a heavier molecular construction. This means that, compared to regular water, it has a higher density that helps slow neutrons down just enough without actually absorbing them during the fission process. Heisenberg and co. knew that if they were to fully harness the potential of atomic energy, they would need a well-established hydroelectric plant and a skilled team, one that could manufacture heavy water on an industrial scale. This would all come within arm's reach with Operation Gunnerside, Germany's invasion of Denmark and Norway on the 9th of April 1940. Not only was Norway key to Hitler's plans to disrupt Allied shipping in the North Atlantic, but it was also home to the world's largest hydroelectric plant. Located just here outside the town of Rjukan in the Telemark region stands the Vemork hydroelectric power plant. By swooping down, exploring modern satellite image and several historic photographs of the period, we get a clear idea of what a formidable target it would be. Situated on a rock shelf, partway up the southern side of a steep ravine, some 1,000 feet from summit to River Thor, it was made virtually impenetrable by the surrounding thick forest to the south, east and west, and these sheer cliffs that protected the northern approaches. The complex itself was actually very large, with a pumping station at the top of the ravine and these distinctive pipelines leading 580 meters down the hillside to the main compound. At 230 by 350 meters, it consisted of the main hydroelectric plant building, a 7-story concrete structure measuring 25 by 100 meters, where the main production was conducted, with water entering the top story and being processed at each subsequent lower level until reaching the basement where the resulting deuterium oxide was produced and stored. Outside the main structure, but within the compound, were numerous smaller buildings, including workers' housing for some of the plant's 600 workers, storage tanks and whole massive power lines and assorted outbuildings. Running eastwards along the southern side of the valley was a small rail line which was used to bring in machinery to the factory complex. For those who worked in the complex, access was made by this single route, a road cut into the hillside which crossed the ravine to its north via this suspension bridge. It's clear that if the Allies were to target Vemork, which should fall into German hands shortly after the initial April invasion, it was going to be a tough nut to crack, but where there's a will, there's a way. Meanwhile, the British had caught a whiff of the Germans' interest in the plant through Norwegian resistance, more specifically, Professor Leif Tronstad, a former plant consultant. But it didn't take a nuclear scientist to know that an atomic bomb in the hands of Hitler would quite simply spell disaster. Something had to be done. But how exactly? Well, British High Command was asking that very same question. Of course, it meant destroying or sabotaging the Vemork plant, but it was easier said than done. Bombing from the air was considered to be too risky due to the plant's awkward situation, and no guarantee that it would destroy the capacitors or the tubes of heavy water located deep in the main building's basement. Seemingly, all roads led to sending operatives into the plant and destroying it from the inside. A suicide mission? Possibly, but after some long deliberation it was deemed to be the only viable option. Fast forward to January 1943. The Allies, they were in a tricky spot. Just 3 months earlier, their second attempt at neutralizing the Vemork plan had failed miserably. Operation Freshman was over before even started when, due to poor weather and some technical failures, the heavily laden gliders crashed. In the following days, all survivors were captured, interrogated, and eventually executed by the Gestapo. To add further insult to injury, the Germans obtained valuable maps and letters from the commandos. The element surprise was gone in an instant, and so, in the weeks and months to follow, the Germans went into overdrive. Local villages and towns were combed for suspected resistance fighters, with the Hydra plant effectively being turned into a fortress. Returning to that 1940s image and consulting historical records, we learn that guard towers with searchlights, electrified barbed wire fences, patrols with dogs, and hidden machine gun nests were all installed around the main compound. Around the entire perimeter, hundreds of anti-personnel S-mines were sewn into the ground, making most approaches impossible. In addition, a barracks building housing some 20 to 30 guards was established in the main compound, and a permanently manned sentry post installed on the north side of the suspension bridge on the plant's only approach road. A tough job had just got even tougher. The Allies went back to the drawing board. Enter Operation Gunnerside. Taking the lessons from the previous failed attempts, it was clear that a different approach was needed. How would the British now look to infiltrate and sabotage Vemork? And what would make Gunnerside succeed where Operations Grouse and Freshman had failed? From the very start, it would look rather different. Instead of sending in glider troops as with the previous attempts, the commanders would now parachute onto the Hardanger Plateau, situated right here in the Telemark region's wilderness. After which they would ski their way southeastward across Norway's frozen landscape to the Hydra plant, some 63 kilometers away, all the while avoiding hostile patrols, a tough prospect. Once there, they would infiltrate the plant, descend to the basement, and use explosive charges to destroy the equipment crucial for the production of deuterium oxide. There was, though, a glimmer of hope. The Special Operations Executive knew that some survivors of Operation Grouse were still operational in the Vemork area. With this, not only did the SOE now have operatives who were more familiar with the terrain, but they also had boots on the ground to share vital intelligence with them. It was decided that the new commandos would meet up with the Grouse team and strike Vemork. But who were the men chosen for the job? Let's meet a few. First is 23-year-old Norwegian native, Second Lieutenant Joachim Ronneberg. Born into a prominent business family, he joined the Norwegian Independent Company 1, better known as Company Linge, in 1941, after having escaped by boat to Scotland. When Gunnerside launched, he would head the demolition squad. Joining him as second-in-command and cover squad leader was 31-year-old Sergeant Knut Halkelid. Born in Brooklyn, New York to Norwegian parents, his family returned to Norway when he was 2 years old. Once war came to Norway, he joined the fight in the south, eventually also joining Company Linge after escaping Gestapo's clutches. He was originally supposed to be part of Operation Grouse, but as fate would have it, he was injured just before their departure to Norway. Making up the rest of Team Gunnerside were Fredrik Kaiser, Kasper Edlund, Hans Storhaug, and Birger Stronsheim. And so, on the evening of the 17th of February 1943, Joachim and his men sat with bated breath as the humming of the Halifax engines brought them ever closer to their jump zone. Nervously, they watched and waited, having already made one unsuccessful drop attempt. Then suddenly the green light was on and into the darkness they jumped. Ronneberg recalled that moment. At first we thought we'd been dropped on the right spot, and we made our depots and put down poles for finding the depots when we returned. However, we soon discovered that we were 25 kilometers away from where we should have landed, and things looked very difficult. It turned out they'd been dropped on a frozen lake some 64 kilometers away from Grouse Team's hideout. If that wasn't enough, their trek was immediately delayed by 5 days when heavy snowstorms hit. Luckily, their extensive training back in Scotland had prepared them well. While most were already adept at survival techniques, they now used their training in Arctic warfare, map reading, and camouflage to make the perilous journey towards their rendezvous. Some days later, they finally made contact with the remnants of Grouse Team, now renamed Swallow Team, who had been laying low in a ski shack on the Hardanger Plateau. With no time to waste, they planned their combined assault. We were planning to go down the slopes from the mountains between Vemork and Ryukin, but the local guide said there was too much snow and the slope was too steep. We said that we planned to cross the gorge and they told us that was not possible. Their solution was to mingle with the shift workers when they came up at 10 p.m. and get rid of the sentries down on the suspension bridge. We said, well, we'll have to try the gorge because if we have 20 Norwegians as onlookers when we kill the Germans down there, they'll be shot the next morning. Seemingly caught between a rock and a hard place, the commandos pulled their ace, inside information given to them by a former manager of the plant, Vemork. Thanks to him, not only did they have crucial information regarding the layout of the plant and its security systems, but they also found a possible chink in Vemork's armor, the railway line that runs through the mountains and into the facility. Let's take a look. Winding through this very section of the forested mountainside, it was used to ferry equipment and supplies into the compound. Naturally, it would need to pass through the electric fencing. It was here where the potential weak point lay. Given its remote location, it was safe to assume they would only be lightly guarded. This gave the commandos a better chance to slip past the guarding sentries undetected. The last thing they needed was to be spotted and have the entire German garrison on their backs. Armed with Thompson submachine guns, explosives and grenades, the commandos made their move on the 27th of February 1943. Battling the savage winter gusts, Team Gunnerside made their approach from here, the northern slope. Ditching their skis and camouflage suits in dislocation, they took out their grappling hooks and started their slow descent down the hillside. Ronneberg remembers. We came down through the woods. Our route was very, very steep, with lots of snow, and onto the road. To avoid some workers' buildings, we decided to go straight out into the valley, which meant a lot of climbing. I remember at one point the bus with shift workers passed by. Two of my men who were hiding above the road waiting for the bus to pass nearly fell down on top of the roof of the bus, but it turned out all right. A lucky escape. But now they needed to face the next challenge, crossing the river. Having initially planned to cross over this suspension bridge, it soon became apparent that it was too heavily guarded. They needed to find another way. Ronneberg sent one of his team members to scout for a safer crossing elsewhere. He returned 4 hours later. They were in luck. Some couple of hundred yards further up, he had found a shallower frozen section that they could safely cross with gear and guns in hand. Team Gunnerside quietly and slowly slid their way across the ice, with each step bringing them closer to their target. Now, on the opposite bank, their approach to Vemork began in earnest. After already spending hours traversing the valley's steep northern slopes, they had to repeat the feat by scaling the equally difficult southern slope that would take them to the railway line right here. Finally, at around 11:30 p.m., all were in place and within striking distance of the plant, just a few hundred meters away. While the harsh winter winds had helped them remain silent ghosts in the snow so far, patience in the freezing conditions was equally hard. One wrong move, one slight misjudgment, and all was up. Waiting, biding their time. If their intelligence was correct, the Germans would be changing guards in about 30 minutes' time. We were sitting just outside the fence, watching the changing of the guard down on the bridge. We saw them pass by and waited until they entered the barracks. And then we thought, as it was just over midnight, this is it. We cut a padlock gate and went inside. They had made it. Now the main mission could begin. The weeks of training, months of attempts, and the collective Allied hope all rested on their shoulders. With no time to waste, the commandos split into two teams. Under the commander Knut Haukelid, like a well-oiled machine, the cover squad got into position around the German barracks, their submachine guns ready to fire if they needed to fight their way out. Ronneberg rounded up his demolition squad and quietly they entered the 7-story main building. According to their intel, the electrolytic capacitors and the heavy water stocks were located in the basement. Sneaking down staircase after winding staircase, and with their hearts beating in their throats, they finally reached the basement. To no one's surprise, the door leading to the capacitor room was locked. What to do now? Wait, Brun said there was a secret entrance close by. He was right. A cable duct would be their entry point. Hurriedly, two commanders were boosted into the duct that ran along the ceiling, and while the others stood guard, they crawled through the narrow space. Below them they could hear workers and whirring of machines. Undeterred, they continued their cramped journey. After quietly lowering themselves down an air vent into the capacitor room, they had reached their target and could taste success. Ahead of them lay 18 cells of heavy water, along with a complex array of equipment, all used in the final stage of the refining process. Immediately, the commandos got to work and started planting the 24.5-kilogram high-explosive nitrocellulose charges on the electrostatic equipment and tubes of heavy water. Just then movement was spotted. Inside the room, bent over a logbook, was a single occupant, known only as Johansen. Hearing Norwegian being spoken, he apparently realized just why his countrymen were there and was in no mood to stop them. Though he did cause somewhat of an unusual delay. He asked for his glasses. It was difficult to get glasses in Norway, so he wanted to have them before we lit the charges. I threw away what I was doing in search for these glasses and found the case and handed it to him. He was very pleased and I started getting the initiation sets ready when suddenly said the glasses are not in the case. I said, well, where the hell are they then? And he said, well, they were there when you came in. In the end, I found them being used as a bookmark in his logbook. With the drama over, the now bespectacled Johansen was sent away from the area as the men in the room pressed on, changed the preset 2-minute fuses to a much more dangerous 30 seconds before initiating the sequence and running for the door. A short time later, the basement was rocked by explosions, laying waste to all equipment and stored heavy water. Surely, though, the detonations hadn't gone unnoticed, and the Germans would be storming their position at any moment. But, to their surprise, there was no sound of alarm, no rushing feet. Silence. The basement's thick concrete must have muffled the explosions. This stroke of luck bought the commandos more precious minutes to make their escape. Back with Haukelid and the rest of the cover team, they were holding steady with their sights aimed squarely at the barrack entrance. He recalled, the explosion itself was not very loud at all. I should say around 2 or 3 cars crashing. In fact, the only response was a single German guard appearing from the barracks before returning a short time later, torch in hand, to sweep his beam across the lower stories of the main building. Nothing happening. He didn't know it, but his every move was tracked by 2 sniper rifles and 3 Thompson submachine gun-wielding commandos just a handful of yards away. Finding nothing, he returned to the warmth of his wooden barrack block. Despite the rather disappointing bang, Ronneberg and his team now came racing back up the stairs to meet with the cover team. Returning to their entry point along the train line, one by one, they slipped back through the fence and, like ghosts, disappeared into the night. A few minutes later, as they were scaling back down this rocky ravine, the night was pierced by the wail of sirens and the barking of guard dogs. In the distance, German voices shouted angrily as flames spread through the building. But it was too late. The job was done, and the Germans never even knew what had hit them. The raid on the Vemork hydro plant was a resounding success and went down as one of the war's greatest special operations, despite not a single shot being fired. The commandos' bravery had very real consequences for the German atomic program too. In a matter of seconds, over 500 kilograms of heavy water was lost, but more importantly, so too the specialized machinery required to manufacture it. It would take the Germans months to repair the damage and even more months to replenish their destroyed supply of heavy water. While not a knockout blow, it was a punch that the German nuclear program never truly recovered from, effectively handing the initiative back to the Allies in the race for the atomic bomb. So what happened to the men who led Gunnerside? Leader of the cover team, Knut Haukelid's fight against German heavy water was only getting started. In 1944, upon orders from the British War Cabinet, he would help sabotage and sink the ferry SF Hydro as she transported heavy water across Lake Tinn. He would remain in the military until 1974, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. He died in 1994, aged 83. And what about Joachim Ronneberg? His fight against the occupiers would continue too. He would participate in various sabotage missions right up until Norway's liberation in 1945 and will receive multiple awards, including Norway's highest military honor. Today, the Vemork plant main building, which replaced the demolished wartime one in 1977, is designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site and houses a museum honoring all of those who risked and in many cases gave their lives to strike a vital blow against the Nazi atomic bomb project. A sacrifice we shouldn't forget. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, want to check out our dedicated podcast, World War II, Both Sides of the Wire. Join hosts Jesse Alexander and Professor Matthias Strone as they look at the fascinating story of the German occupation of Norway. Catch it right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. That's all this time. We'll see you again soon.